Welcome and good morning, everyone. Happy to welcome you along to today's session where we'll talk about some off-cycle rule changes that CMS is proposing for the under 65 marketplace. My name is Randy Lober, your growth marketing manager here at Action Benefits, and part of my role is to help you all grow your business. And part of doing that is to figure out what exactly the playing field might look like and get you participating in shaping this rule if we can here today. Joining me today is Chelsea Smith, our learning and development specialist here. Chelsea, go ahead and say hi to the people before we get started.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming here today and spending some time with Randy and I while we help you get prepared for some of these new proposed rules. It's kind of strange to be doing this in April. Normally we're doing it, it's a little bit colder outside, but don't let the cold catch up on us now. We're almost there. Any questions you have, please put them into the chat or the Q&A, and I will be happy to answer them for you as we go through today's session.
Thank you for joining us, Chelsea, and thank you for helping to take care of the chat and questions. And please do ask all the questions. I'm sure you'll have quite a few today. You'll note that generally Chelsea and I are camera on people, but today our cameras aren't working quite as hard as we are today. So you just get the pleasure of our voices today. It's a lot of today's in one sentence. Let's get started. We want to know, though, we've got a wide variety of agents here in the room. Which of these statements best describes you? Is it A, you're brand new to the under 65 market and you're just kind of curious about what's happening here? Is it B, you have some experience in the under 65 market, but you're new to Action Benefits? C, you have some experience with under 65 and Action, but you're just really curious about what's in this proposed rule? Or is it D, you're a seasoned pro and you just love spending time with Action? You roll out of bed and said, insurance compliance, that's a thing I have to do today. Go ahead and put the letter of the statement that describes you in the chat, please, and that'll help us tailor some of our talking points here today. Thank you. As a reminder, you can chat publicly or privately, so you can choose to either let just Chelsea and I know what you're thinking, or to let the whole audience know what you're thinking. We have a lot of people that are experienced with us and that are confused or curious about the rule. Hopefully you won't be confused by the end of today's session. But you will be a little bit more dangerous about what's coming and knowing what's coming down the pipe, and you'll be able to comment and give Uncle Sam a piece of your mind if you so desire. Thank you for telling us that. That lets us know there's a bit of experience here. Patty will help you get up to speed here, a little bit of background here as well. Let's go ahead and get started. So if we're going to talk about a proposed rule, we need to talk about what usually happens and why Chelsea said this is a little bit unusual. So we're going to give you a little bit of a timeline of what typically happens and what's different about what we're talking about here today. Generally speaking, the cycle goes, CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, if you're brand new to the market, they propose rulemaking in the fall of each year, generally in November or so. In the under 65 market, that really governs, again, marketplace operations and some other, other markets impacted by the ACA. And generally speaking, the public has at least 60 days to comment on that rule. The public being folks off the street like you and I, could be hospital systems, could be healthcare systems, could be insurers weighing in and providing their feedback on the rule. Yes, CMS, we love that idea. No, CMS, we hate that idea, and everywhere in between. And generally speaking, in a normal year, they do publish the final rule shortly after those comments close in, and they publish that in mid-spring. This year was a little bit off because the outgoing administration wanted to get things in place before the new administration came in. So they kind of sped up the timeline a little bit and published this year's final rule in mid-January. And we had some sessions on that a bit earlier on this year in January, of course, when the rule came out. Have some good pieces on our website too, kind of explaining what's happening. But Chelsea and I are happy to answer your questions about that as well. So that's what usually happens. But as you may have heard, there are several new sheriffs in town, and CMS, citing a need in their language to support program integrity for the marketplace, proposes a new rule in early March of this year. with public comment closing for that rule on April 11th of this year. So we will have some time here today. We'll show you how to put that comment in if you so desire. But it's really unusual for a rule to come out right now, which is why we invited you here today to hear a bit more about that rule, about what the new administration is proposing, and some changes that might impact the marketplace going forward. So that's kind of why we're here today and what changes we want to put in front of you. So there's a few big areas that the CMS is proposing to make rules in. And again, everything we talk about here today is just proposed because it has to go through the comment period and then be finalized before it actually becomes the regulation of the land, not the law of the land. So these are things that are likely to happen, but may not happen exactly as we talk about here them today, depending on how CMS adjust those regulations in response to comment, or if they do adjust those regulations in response to comment. One of the first things that comes up is a uniform OEP. So shortening that open enrollment period in the fall, as well as making it uniform across both federal and state-based marketplaces. We'll talk about that in a moment. There are significant changes to past due premium policies. Can we effectuate coverage while still owing a balance on a previous policy that might have lapsed or closed? And there's some changes there. The previous administration had lax is not the right word, but let's say permissive about file and reconcile, that taxpayers' obligation to file their taxes and reconcile their taxes with their advanced premium tax credits at the end of every tax year. So those policies may change coming up. The timeline in which consumers have to verify their income after enrolling or confirming their marketplace application, that is on the table here as well. Some big changes to automatic re-enrollments to pay attention to. Some of them good for beneficiaries, or good for enrollees. Some of them you'll want to make sure you are really proactive in working with them with, assuming that the rule goes into effect here. There are some changes to agent and broker enforcement in response to all of the fraudulent enrollments that have happened and hopefully have tempered down some in the past year or so. There's a grab bag of other impacts that we'll talk about here today as well. And we'll mention some things that are not talked about in the rule. Some things that are going to remain the same, that might still be a pain in the you-know-whats, but things you'll still have to deal with here today. So that's kind of where we're going to get going here today. And we're going to start talking, first knowing a little bit more about what you're curious about. So for all those areas of rulemaking, is there anything that jumps out to you? Is there anything that you're saying, Randy, Chelsea, talk more about that here today, or what's piquing your interest? Go ahead and write a few words in the chat for us. That'll help us shape some of our discussion going forward.
It sounds like I might be doing, as an agent, a few things differently when my clients walk in the door, or some of my older clients who I'm used to seeing a lot. I might have to tell them something different when they come in as to what is expected of them.
And so some folks, coming in talking about the re-enrollment or automatic re-enrollments. What's that going to look like? And definitely some concern about the uniform OEP coming in. So let's dive in. Let's get right to it. Let's start with that uniform OEP and talk about the current state, what's proposed to happen, and what's the real life impact for you as agents working in this market. So right under the current or under the previous administration, and as currently written into regulation, the fall open enrollment period runs from November 1st through January 15th. State marketplaces, so Georgia, for example, runs their own individual state-based marketplace. They could extend that window beyond January 15th, but they could not shorten that window. Some states ran their OEPs through the end of January, giving you all of November, December, and January to enroll in coverage. And gosh, that's a really flexible way to approach that. What CMS proposes, though, in this rule coming up, and again, hasn't gone into effect yet, but it's open for comment and may go into effect as written. What CMS is proposing is a uniform OEP across all marketplaces, whether they're federal, whether they're state-based. No matter what kind of marketplace you're working in, OEP would run only from November 1st through December 15th. In real life, what that means for you as agents, especially if you work in the employee benefits arena or you work in the Medicare market, is that fourth quarter busy season is going to be a little bit busier, right? As we work with agents, it's very common for agents to pair under 65 business and Medicare business. You work at sort of in those individual arenas. And on occasion, we heard folks saying, you know what, I've got to get all of my Medicare business attended to during AEP because I know I'll have some cushion on the back end to take care of those folks who are my individual clients. Should this rule go into effect, that would no longer be the case. You'd have through December 15th to take care of your OEP, your under 65, your marketplace clients, and that's going to really compress your working window to work on renewals with your clients here as well. So that's one thing to be aware of, and that's really the big impact that we see. But you are the ones who might be in the trenches. Well, how might that change what you do, or how might that change consumers and what they might pay attention to?
I know if I had a very procrastination prone client that was an under 65 individual, I might make sure that they were aware of these changes, so that they knew that they didn't have as much time to kind of look around or think about what they wanted to do, if they want to change something, that we have the same deadline as your over 65 friends.
Right, and some conversation privately coming into that effect, right? That it's going to require it should it go into effect, it would require a little bit more proactive outreach before AEP and OEP begin here, right? To really socialize and educate your current clients about these changes or these potential changes. Let's also talk a bit about the past due premium policies and how those might impact your clients coming up here as well. So currently, when we talk about past due premium policies and under the 2026 final rule that went into effect, or would go into effect for contract year 2026 rather, it gets very confusing when we talk about timelines here, right? So what we have on the screen here, it was proposed by the previous administration for contract year 2026, so beginning in January 2026. And they put into effect that beginning with that contract year, carriers could use either a fixed dollar or gross percentage-based threshold before imposing grace periods or policy terminations onto enrollees. In effect, what that means is you might have clients that have very low premiums because they're receiving significant advanced premium tax credits. And when we talk about very low premiums, we're talking about those $10, those $5 premiums, so on and so forth. And the previous administration had wanted to give those folks some flexibility, right? They might forget to pay $5 or so a month, or $10 or so a month. Maybe they didn't set up their EBT, but the previous administration had an emphasis on keeping those folks covered. So they said, as long as your past due balance doesn't exceed either a percentage of the total premium you owe or a fixed dollar amount, the carrier would not have to impose grace periods or policy terminations, disenrollments. The new sheriffs in town, though, are proposing this rule. Instead, they would eliminate both of those options, only allowing use of a net percentage threshold to prevent that grace period being put into effect. So think to like your paychecks, and when we're talking about gross percentage and net percentage here, when we talk about gross percentage, the rule that would have gone into effect in 2026 would have based this percentage on the total amount of premium for the contract. The new rule from CMS, the new proposal from CMS, would base it on the net percentage of premium. What the big deal is here is consumers with small overdue premium balances could still remain covered, but they'd have a little bit lower threshold to work with here. So carriers wouldn't be forced to carry those non-paying customers on their books. So good news if you're a carrier, challenging news perhaps if you're a consumer, and definitely requires some education if you're an agent. Chelsea, I know you had a few more words on this as well.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on how your plan decided to enforce that premium policy, because now that I had to walk through myself, to be able to talk about this, what a net percentage versus a gross percentage was. I thought of it as kind of like this: if you owed $10 for your premium, let's say, great premium, by the way, but if let's say you did, and you got a premium tax credit of $1, then you would pay a percentage on that $9 to keep your coverage or to prevent that grace period. So it's at least even across the board, so you don't have to maybe get into as much rigmarole with clients if they have different, if their carriers are using that different fixed or gross dollar percentages. Now it's just the net percentage, but again, that might work out better for carriers because now they can't just say, oh, just pay me, $20 and you can keep your coverage and just finish up the rest later whenever you have a chance. So there's a little less flexibility as well to get people staying on their coverage.
Yeah. So that's a big deal, and that's a theme we'll see throughout these regulations here as well. Is it's maybe a little tougher to keep coverage under these new guidelines in the name of promoting program integrity. The other thing that the current administration, or the previous administration, sorry, had in place was that carriers can't require payment of past due premiums before effectuating new coverage. So if I had a balance of $300, I was $300 behind in my premium, or whatever the case might be, but I did go and try to buy a new marketplace policy or re-engage in that marketplace policy, the carrier can't require me to pay those past due premiums before effectuating new coverage. What CMS is proposing to do now is allowing insurers to add that past due premiums to the binder payment, meaning that when I go shopping and I choose a new plan as a consumer and I want to enroll, I've got to pay back what I owe that carrier and pay the first month's premium in order to be covered. So for what CMS really targeted in some of the language in this rule is they became aware in their eyes of consumers really taking advantage of grace periods and the guaranteed availability rules of the marketplace, and kind of paying premiums when they knew they needed coverage and not paying premiums when they weren't going to use that coverage. CMS is saying here that if you're going to, if you're going to have coverage, stay covered, pay for it. And what it also prevents, though, or could make tougher for some folks, is that if you do have a past due premium amount, obviously, of course, it's going to be a bit tougher to come back from that. So if something happens and I have a $300 balance, a $600 balance, I've got to repay that before I can get a new plan to cover myself going forward. So that could be an obstacle to coverage for some people. And again, something you'd want to make your clients aware of should these changes go into effect. There's also, as we said, some proposed changes to the file and reconcile process where taxpayers have to file their taxes, hopefully, and to make sure that what they file and the tax credit, the premium tax credits they used, line up with what they received and what they should have been eligible for. As it currently stands, consumers can fail to file and reconcile for 2 consecutive years before they're in any danger of losing their APTCs. And again, the previous administration really put the emphasis on growing the marketplace program, growing ACA enrollments. And the new administration doesn't seem to want to shy away from that, but they do want to stick more to the letter of the law as it was written. So instead, they propose going back to what the ACA originally required, filing and reconciling every year to maintain eligibility for premium tax credits for the next year. So there is no grace period of 2 years, so to speak, in this particular lane. They would mandate that consumers do file the taxes, reconcile those taxes each and every year. The administration was careful to point out in the rulemaking or proposed rule that they see this as a way to potentially reduce advanced premium tax credit spending from the government. So saves the government some money, right? If they're not paying folks that should not be eligible for those premium tax credits. But again, consumers would need to take a more active role in their coverage, be more proactive in filing their taxes and reconciling their premium tax credit usage here. So quick check-in with our agent community here. If those changes went into effect, the past due premium policies and the file and reconcile policies, how might that impact your business and what you might need to do with and for your clients? Give you a chance to weigh in here in the chat before we move on.
The optimist in me wonders if, because they're writing rules about how to file and reconcile for premium tax credits, if that we can infer then that we're going to keep those premium tax credits in the future. Because I know that's, we still don't really technically have anything saying whether or not those are going to stick around past the end of the year. And I know that that can be a huge blow to some of us with our under 65 business, or for those of us who have under 65 coverage. So hopefully the fact that this rule is being made gives us the impression that these will stay, but you know, I haven't been around long enough to know like historically how these rules play out long term over years and years. So maybe some of you guys might be able to teach me about that, but hopefully that means these premium tax credits are going to stay.
Well, to be clear, premium tax credits will always be there. What's really at stake here, what expires at the end of the year, is the expanded premium tax credits, where consumers don't have to pay more than 8.5% of their income toward their health insurance premiums. That's at the stake in the end of the year. CMS had previously established a mid-March or April deadline for Congress to act on that, so it could do the rulemaking that it needs to do to either allow or roll back those advanced premium tax credits. But Congress had not yet acted on that, and when they do, we will let you know. Back to the topic at hand, though, some of you saying again that it would require you to be more proactive and do some more consumer education. Happy to brainstorm with you on what that could look like for you and your agency going forward. There would be some changes to the income verification process here as well. Right now, consumers currently have 90 days to verify their income or any other potential DMI or data matching issue that the marketplace finds. And beyond that 90 days, the consumers also automatically receive a 60-day extension if for whatever reason they don't provide that proof in those first 90 days. And that's an automatic process. There's no need to apply for that extension. No need to say, hey, I need a little more time to find the paperwork or to work with the IRS, whatever the case might be. It's just really right now a flat 150 days that you get to prove that your income is what you say it was, and then you are eligible for the premium tax credits that you are trying to use. CMS took a look at that and says, I don't know about that. In the name of program integrity, we're going to eliminate the automatic extension and really sure we could grant it with extenuating circumstances, but that 90-day timeline is where we really want to be. So we're not issuing premium tax credits that folks aren't actually eligible for. So really, again, the big deal here is that consumers would have a shorter time frame to provide that income information. We know that as fantastic agents you are, whenever your consumers receive a DMI or when they receive a notice from the marketplace that they need to verify their income, they're probably freaking out saying, hey, I need to do this right away. And you're helping them do that right away. But know that 90 days is would be a really hard 90 days coming up. We couldn't count on that extension going forward. There's another layer to income verification, though. Right now, marketplaces, whether it's a state or federal marketplace, can simply accept the consumer's attestation to their household size and income if there is no income information available. Maybe they are lawfully present but don't have a tax paying record yet with the IRS in order to maintain that tax paying background, or whatever the case might be. If we can't verify their income right now, the marketplaces can say, yeah, we'll take your word for it that your income is what you say it is, and that your household is as big as you say it is, and you're eligible for X amount of tax credits. We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. CMS is proposing to essentially remove the benefit of the doubt going forward, would only allow marketplaces, whether state or federal, to use IRS data to confirm household size and income size, or other trusted sources, such as that from Treasury or otherwise, or an approved alternate verification process. So maybe looking at employer pay stubs if they don't yet have that taxpayer history with the IRS going forward. The big impact here, of course, is that consumers will need verifiable proof of their income, a letter saying, yes, dear Mr. Government regulator, I do make this amount, is no longer good enough or would no longer be good enough under this proposed rule. The other big change that may throw a wrinkle into how you work with customers, especially as life change has happened to them, is the verification of SEP eligibility. Right now, marketplaces can and do allow enrollment via a special enrollment period before they verify the eligibility for that SEP. So right now, for example, if you move or you add a child to that contract or whatever, they'll let you add a child, right? And they'll give you that whether you're 30 or 60 days, depending on the SEP, to provide documentation to support that. Instead, CMS is proposing that marketplaces would be required to verify SEP eligibility for at least 75% of SEPs prior to accepting the enrollment. And the CMS in the guidance estimates that they could do so by looking at their two most common SEPs, things like adding a child, adding a dependent, so on and so forth. Or confirming a marriage or those sorts of things. So what would happen here is the really net impact to your clients is that when marketplaces or should marketplaces need to put this rule into effect, they'd require the paperwork at the time of application. There's no more backfilling. So if you're going to claim a marriage, right, that's the SEP, that marriage certificate's got to be submitted at the time of application, or would have to be submitted at the time of application, not, given those 30, 60 days to submit that in support of the SEP later on. So you really would have to have your ducks in a row beforehand, not after. So given what we know about SEP changes and those other things, what might need to change about the support you provide to your clients prior to that enrollment, or how could you see that impacting your relationships going forward? And there's definitely a theme here, right, coming in. Got to be more proactive, got to educate, got to do more to educate folks about these changes should they go into effect. There's also some proposed rulemaking around automatic re-enrollments. Two different areas we want to take a look at here rather. Right now, there are beneficiaries out there who have a $0 premium obligation by virtue of receiving large amounts or significant amounts of advanced premium tax credits. And right now, they can passively re-enroll from year to year. So if we think about that file and reconcile requirement, right, I don't have to refile my taxes for 2 years, can still claim it. And I don't need to actively confirm that this is still the plan I want or this is the coverage I need, because I can just passively renew, passively re-enroll. And so they can kind of float along at this $0 premium, receiving advanced premium tax credits to make their premium zero for several years. What CMS is proposing to do, when my mouse cooperates, is they want to make sure, incentivize folks to take a little bit more active, be more active in their re-enrollment decision each year. So what they propose to do is reduce the amount of advanced premium tax credit by $5 in that first month for consumers who don't actively re-enroll, and that reduction would stay in place until the consumer makes an active re-enrollment decision. But they do seek additional comment on that rule. Is $5 enough to force consumers into action? Should it be larger? Should there be another way that they would force consumers to actively re-enroll and make sure they're eligible for those premium tax credits as they refill out their marketplace application, or to choose benefits that are right for them? So there's a great opportunity to have your voice heard. But for your consumers that do have $0 premiums, their habits would need to change here, right? They would not be able to passively re-enroll year to year. They would need to go in and update their application each year and confirm that, yes, this is the coverage I want, because if not, they would be hit with that $5 a month premium.
Sounds like just another spot for agents to have a touch point with those clients that they didn't have before.
Right. If you had, some of these clients on your books that had no premium liability out of their own pockets, right, this is another spot where you might be spending some time doing some client education for sure. The other thing which I think excited about, or as excited I can be is about federal rulemaking, is that CSR eligible consumers in bronze plans would no longer be automatically re-enrolled in silver plans. Right now, that's what the marketplace currently does. If there is someone that is eligible for cost sharing reductions on the marketplace, so those CSRs that help reduce their out-of-pocket maximums, help reduce their deductibles, help reduce their co-pays and co-insurance amounts. Right now, if those folks are in a bronze plan, at the end of the plan year, CMS automatically re-enrolls them in a silver plan so they can claim those CSRs. But for agents that have been in the industry for any period of time, that oftentimes when you look at the total out-of-pocket cost, when we're talking about premiums versus those out-of-pocket costs that come with deductible co-insurance copay, that sometimes the bronze plan is still actually cheaper than the CSR eligible silver plan for the client, even when we can consider the cost of care and everything going forward. It's only when someone's eligible, typically speaking, for the highest levels of CSRs that those silver plans really make sense for them. So what CMS proposes to do is prohibit this sort of automatic re-enrollment. Consumers would instead stay in their bronze plan, even if they are CSR eligible. But the big deal here is, though, that each year consumers would again need to yearly weigh the cost of that CSR plan, the true cost of that CSR plan versus the total cost of coverage on the bronze plan that you or they might have found on their own. And I kind of answered this question a bit earlier. What meta level of plans do you typically advise CSR eligible consumers to enroll in? I imagine if someone has a CSR, silver, is a natural fit, right? So they can take advantage of those benefits. But oftentimes when you do the math, again, as some of you are pouring in here in the chat, when you're not eligible for a ton of CSR, that bronze plan can still make quite a bit of sense. Some other big stuff coming down the pipe is agent and broker enforcement. And CMS was careful to, address everything that the previous administration had done to address the fraudulent re-enrollments, where bad actors on the marketplace would go in, change a consumer's plan, change their advanced premium tax credit, and really assign themselves as AOR with, frankly, a minimal amount of effort and technical know-how. And that's what really spurred the consent documentation that we talk about now. Those fraudulent re-enrollments really spurred, where your CMS portal has to be re-authenticated every 12 hours with the marketplace, EDE pathway that you might be using. That's where all that kind of came from. CMS took a hard look at that. And right now, they have taken some steps to crack down, but really when they're making decisions about, does this action warrant any enforcement, whether it's a suspension of the marketplace agreements, so you can no longer run a marketplace business this year, whether it's a complete, removal from the marketplace, you'll never be able to write on the marketplace again, or anywhere in between. We don't really have a clear standard of evidence or burden of proof that we're looking for in making those decisions. So what CMS proposes is the preponderance of the evidence standard to agent enforcement decisions. And where this makes a difference is when CMS is looking at a pattern of fraud or a case of possible fraud or anything else on the marketplace, the preponderance of evidence standard only requires that they look at the evidence and say, this is what is most likely to have happened. And that's in contrast with the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, like that you're probably more familiar with in criminal cases. In criminal cases where we have to say this, the evidence has to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this is definitely what happened. And you got to have a really solid case. The barrier here for what CMS has to prove in order to take action against an agent or an agency is a bit lower. They only have to say that this is probably what happened based on the evidence. So what this means for you is that the application of that standard can be a bit more subjective. If you run into the right regulator on the wrong day that has, is feeling some type of way about this, or is only using this, has to use only this preponderance standard, is that could really, swing enforcement decisions against folks more aggressively than they might have than under a different evidentiary standard. Big deal is, though, always do the right thing, always remain compliant. We know that you all are, because we don't get any complaints about our agents from CMS or otherwise. We haven't seen or anything that you have been under investigation. So just keep on doing what you're doing, but know that other folks out there who are not doing what they should be are under the microscope in a different way now by CMS.
It always feels like we're preaching to the choir when we talk about slides like these, because all the people who are going to
Right.
be in this are the ones who are following the rules, and have a team of people behind them who make sure that they are following the rules too.
Yeah, an individual team full of 10 folks, in fact. Let's talk about some other impacts that don't really fit neatly into a bucket here, but some things that are proposed here in the rule. First thing is DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Those folks, recipients, would be excluded from the lawfully present definition for coverage eligibility, meaning DACA recipients would no longer be eligible for coverage from the marketplace where they currently are, should this rule go into effect. The rule would also prohibit including sex trait modification as an EHB starting with plan year 2026. So any sex trait modification, states could not require plans to cover that. When they set their own package of EHBs, should they choose to set their own package of EHBs going forward. They would also re-adopt a premium growth measure used in plan years 20 to 21. What that really does is affects how plans calculate the actuarial value of their plans, and affects calculations for cost sharing limits, affordability exemptions, and employer shared responsibility payment amounts going forward. So kind of actuarial stuff happening in the background that you may see and feel a little bit as you see some premium pressures moving, but nothing you can really control. And the other thing that is interesting, though, in the rule is they want to create more product variety at each metal tier by expanding the actuarial value thresholds for each tier. So whereas the previous administration, there was a real push to standardize marketplace plans, keep you in these de minimis ranges for the actuarial value of those plans, and saying, yes, have only these benefits, right, for those standardized plans. New sheriff in town wants to kind of widen things up again and allow for different levels of innovation here, so to speak. So they would allow, for example, a bronze plan has to be at, cover about 60% of the folks' costs. They would allow that range to be either plus 2%, so cover up to 62%, or minus 4%, so cover down to 56%, as long as they're covering some other things before deductible. So they're hoping that by allowing a wider AV range here, again, carriers can bring more innovative plans to the market, is the hope, and not just narrower plans or less benefit-rich plans. So talked about a lot of changes here so far. Would love to hear from you. Which is most likely to impact how you do business? And would you say that's a positive or a negative change? Please feel free to put a few words here in the chat.
My brain just goes back to the SEP or open enrollment being a little snugger, because I always, same thing, I always had that in my mind. Like, okay, get through AEP, get all the AEP stuff taken care of, then I can worry about my under 65 thoughts. That's not going to be the case next year.
Likely so, right? Should the rule go into effect. There are some definite negatives here, right? It makes it a bit difficult for consumers to keep their coverage. So it would require a bit more proactive approach from you in order to help take care of them and make them say their coverage. Jan, it comes in and says retiring documentation or requiring documentation with the application can be impossible in some situations. So how do we solve for that? And there are ways that you can make your voice heard on this, and Chelsea will dump the link here in the chat. I said that every year these plans are, or the rules are open for public comment. Those comments don't have to be formal official letters. They don't have to be on any formal official letterhead or anything like that. If you were to look through the comments here, there's about, when I took the screenshot, there's about 1.4 thousand of them. I assume the number has grown even more since then. People from all walks of life weigh in on these, whether they're doctors, insurers, insurance agents, anyone that wants to say anything about these rules can, and CMS is obligated to read and respond to your comments in the rules, so you know that someone will have read it. Whether or not they do anything with that, again, it is up to CMS, but again, they are at least legally obligated to read that rule. So if you visit that link here that Chelsea just put in the chat, regulations.gov, it'll bring you right to this screen here. And if you click on open for comments, it will walk you through a window where you can say who you are, exactly what you think about these rules here. You also have the full text of the rule available to you there, so you can read more if there's something that was unclear from today's session, where you can weigh in, have your voice heard by Uncle Sam, and hopefully sway the rules in a way that works better for you and your business. So I want to make sure, at least again, that you're aware of that the comment period does close on April 11th. So if you are going to do that, make sure you don't sit on it too much here. But I do want you to make your voices heard. This is a great opportunity to put your thumb on the scale as much as you can and impact your industry, your business going forward. Seeing AV calculators expand would be quite helpful, right? Betsy, if you don't know, was one of our carrier reps from McLaren Health Plan, in fact. And we actually have an appointment to talk a bit later today about some unrelated things, but I'm sure carriers are chomping at the bit, right, to be able to really differentiate and innovate on their products rather than being forced into that narrow shoebox the previous administration tried to put them in.
I just went and took a look. Gosh, guys, there are 9,650 comments currently posted and 10,038 comments total on this payer notice. So if you have thoughts that you want to tell Uncle Sam, you are not the only one.
Right. Let's pump that up to 11,000. Let's go. There are some things, though, as we close here today that neither the 2026 rule or the proposed rule proposed to change. So want to make sure you're aware of those. And that is that consent documentation has not changed, has not been proposed to change in either of the rules. So again, when you're gathering consumer consent to work with them in the marketplace, that there is no prescribed format for that. But again, there are some things that the consent documentation does have to have. A description of the scope, purpose, and duration of your consent, the date consent was given, the name of the consumer representative, your name, and how they can withdraw that consent for you to work with them on the marketplace as well. Some folks collect that via voice, via Agency Block, who we have a partnership with. If you're not yet using Agency Block, we can get you a 10% discount on your first year there. Let Chelsea or I know if you are interested in that. Some folks use paper or DocuSign or digital signatures. Lots of different ways you can accomplish this. CMS doesn't prescribe a way, but do know that you do have to get a consumer's permission before you start working with them on the marketplace. The other thing that didn't change at all in this new proposal was that review of marketplace application, where you must include the date the information was reviewed, that the consumer has had the opportunity to review the entire application, verify it's correct, that the consumer understands all the attestations at the end of the application, and that includes your name or agency. In the plan year 2026 final rule, CMS did say that it is going to work on and will produce a form to help with this. So that is coming down the pipe here as well. So just be aware of that as well. There's other things to be aware of here as you go forward. There's a variety of different ways you can collect both consent and review if you don't already yet have an established process. We know, for example, some folks don't yet work on Marketplace yet, but you can have signed documents to confirm this, including a AOR letter from the carrier would work here just as well. If you have a verbal confirmation audio recording, that could work just as well here too. A written response, email or otherwise, to your communication that says, the consumer agrees for you to work with them on the Marketplace and they've had the opportunity to review their application, or any other means that fits your business and meets all the requirements we've laid out here. Here at Action, we do provide templates that you can use, inspired by documents produced by CMS, but without all the CMS branding on them. Contact your account manager here at Action, or let Chelsea or I know if you'd like a copy. We also have these loaded in DocuSign, so you can get them straight right out to your folks, have them digitally sign them and get them back to you. So you can maintain copies of that consent and copies of that review documentation here as well. Should also point out again that when you're changing NPNs on a consumer application, this process didn't change either. It has not been proposed to change, but it's important for you to be aware of going forward is that whenever an NPN changes, consumers must give consent prior to a change on that application. Where we run into this most often is in two different places. When you are trying to, when a consumer chooses you as their new AOR, for example, that's where right now the Marketplace requires that three-way call. That three-way call on its own does not serve as consent. You still need to document consent in addition to that. The other thing where we see this coming into play often is if you happen to be fortunate enough to have multiple people in your agency working on under 65 business, but you need someone else to service that contract for whatever reason. If the new servicing agent's NPN wasn't originally given consent, that new servicing agent wasn't given consent, they might need to they would need to go back and collect new consent to serve that contract. So instead, make sure that if you are in that situation, that your consent documents are written to give consent to the entire agency, not just to one person. We should point out that re-enrollments or renewals do not need new consent forms if all information is still correct and valid here going forward. Just some friendly reminders as you go forward, working with your folks and letting you know that this stuff is not on the table to change. Even though you might grumble about it, it's really there to protect both the consumer and protect your business here as well. All that said, folks, I want to thank you again for your time and attention here today. We talked about 8 different areas: agent broker enforcement, that uniform OEP period, past due premium policies, file and reconcile policies changing here, how DMIs and income verification might change, automatic and re-enrollment and potential consequences there, as well as that grab bag of other impacts, including the possible expansion of AV values here. And we talked about consent remaining the same here as well. So a lot of stuff done in the past 48 minutes or so. But Chelsea and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have about that.